I'm Cliff DeSolan, and you're watching nlcTrans. Tonight I'm here with my dear friend and co-host, Tara Alexander, who's currently looking for camels and ducks. And I'm sure she'll explain that to you later. But
only if I find them.
Anyway, Happy New Year to everybody out there. And Merry Christmas, too. I think we missed, we've been off the air for a few weeks. We had well, I was sick, and then we had weather problems, and so we've been off for a couple of weeks. So anyway, just to let you know, before I forget, this is our last week at 8 o'clock. Next week, we're going to be on at 7, correct?
Yes.
For 13 weeks, and then after that, we don't really know.
We'll know next week.
So yeah, so we'll keep you posted on that. But next week, we are moving back from 8 to 7. So sort of fall back for us. But,
so we have our own.
Yeah.
We have our own nlcTrans saving time.
Yeah. So we're moving
forward.
We're going to 7 o'clock, which will be nice. The 7 o'clock is nice. It's nice. It gets us home a little bit earlier, but so we kind of like it. But the 8 o'clock is nice too. So we kind of been flip flopping back and forth, but so we're fine with it.
Depends on who's taking what slot in the schedule.
But anyway, so next week, 7 o'clock, just remember. Anyway.
Who's taking which slot in the schedule?
Yeah. So anyway, it's a new year. We're back. It's 2013. And yes, I am a little bit superstitious and triskaidekaphobic, and sorry, but so 2013 is going to be kind of an interesting year. I wanted to.
Then it's not the year 13.
Well, yeah, I know. It's not the year 13, but
I'm not sure it's even divisible by 13.
It's probably not. Anyway, so there's some. We actually have some B-roll for you tonight, and we have some. I was going to talk a little bit about New Year's resolutions and superstitions and things, maybe if we have time.
Go for it.
But I just wanted to mention one thing, and I may be off on this. I grabbed this, and I couldn't get a whole lot of information, and hopefully we'll get some more. And Kate Raimondi hopefully will call us and let us know. But there is a fundraiser coming up. Kate is doing the thing for rescued horses. It's the Beechbrook Farm Equine Rescue. And they're apparently having a fundraiser, and I believe it's March 27th of this year at the Dog Watch Cafe in Stonington. And we will get you more information on that. And actually, we're hoping to get out there to do some on-site filming with Kate and the horses, because horses are fun and cool, and rescue animals it's a really neat thing, and so we're hoping to get
don't shop, adopt.
Yeah, exactly. For dogs or horses or cats or whatever, yeah, adopt.
Oh my.
Yeah, but I think that's really cool, and so hopefully we'll get out there to do a little filming and maybe get Kate to come on and talk to us and promote the fundraiser. But I believe that it's March 27th at the Dog Watch Cafe. So we'll keep you posted on that, and hopefully I got that right. I get stuff on Facebook, and I don't even know how to work Facebook most of the time. So
Hey, at least you're calling it Facebook and not the MyBook face space thing.
It was MySpace. There was the other one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I still have a profile on that, but I haven't been there in several years.
It hasn't been around for 20-something years.
I know it hasn't.
You can be fairly safe that's not going to date you.
Yes, that's hyperbole. But anyway, so anyway, just a few things, and we're like I say, we have some B-roll for you.
Yep, and it's a little over 18 minutes.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in a little while, and. New Year's resolutions. I've got a whole thing I wanted to get on before New Year's and talk about the New Year's superstitions. So we may skip that, but because we sort of missed on that one. But there are all sorts of cool old New Year's superstitions and things. And so anyway, I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas and New Year's and Christmas or whatever holiday it is you celebrate this time of year. I think it's one of those times a year when almost everybody has a holiday. Even if it has to be Festivus.
Festivus, the holiday for the rest of us.
Well, yeah. So whatever you celebrate, hope you had a nice one. And this Christmas was nice. And I got to tell you. Well, okay. I got.
Oh, you brought.
This Christmas, I don't know if you can see this. I got a Tribble. It makes noises and vibrates and does the little Tribble. I don't know if any of you know what a Tribble is, but I will
sure
explain it
some
to
folks
you.
do.
And maybe Tara can make that thing work.
While you explain it,
Well, a Tribble.
so that we don't have to do open triple surgery on camera.
Yes, exactly. So probably most of you know what a Tribble is, but a Tribble was a yes, a Tribble. I don't know if you can hear that. It's a Tribble is just a little critter that purrs and eats.
And it makes you feel good.
And it makes you feel good. And I have a pink Tribble. And the Tribble, it purrs and you can pet it and it purrs and it makes
when you feed it,
a satisfying little noise. And if you feed it, it reproduces like crazy. Yes. Anyway, for any of you who aren't familiar with the Tribble, it's a Star Trek thing. There was a Star Trek episode. I think it was called The Trouble with Tribbles.
The Trouble with Tribbles was the original series episode, and Deep Space Nine did a retro on it called Trials and Tribulations.
Yes. And they were cute. They were these little critters that were on some space station somewhere. They were eating all the wheat, the Quadrotriticale. They were eating up all the wheat and reproducing like crazy in that whole space station full of these little
And they
Tribbles.
didn't like Klingons.
They didn't like Klingons. No. But anyway, it was one of those sort of cute episodes. And they were just these fuzzy little critters that were so cute, but they were like very reproductive, very prolific, and you start with one and you wind up with the whole space station full of them. So anyway, yes, I have one now. I have my very own Tribble.
The pink ones have been specially bred to not reproduce.
Well, that's good, because I don't have a whole lot of Quadrotriticale to feed them. Okay, anyway. So I got a Tribble, and other. Okay. So you probably can't see these, but I am wearing my Mobius earrings and necklace, and I am sort of a Mobius fan. For those of you out there that are not mathematicians and who don't know about Mobius, I actually. I'm not going to bore you because I have like 8 pages here on the mathematics of the Mobius strip. These you probably can't see these, but these are actually little Mobius strips or Mobius bands. And the Mobius band or Mobius strip was actually invented independently and simultaneously by 2 German mathematicians, August Ferdinand Mobius and Johann Benedict Listing in 1858. And I've always thought they were very cool because it's a one-sided surface and it's sort of this twisted ring thing that goes on, and the surface just goes on forever and ever. And it's
so if anyone's not familiar, if you take a strip of paper and you normally connect the 2 ends, you'd have a circle. But if you take one of those ends and rotate it and connect it, and you follow the surface, not the edge, but the surface, then it'll make a half rotation, and you'll follow the inside, and you'll make a half rotation and follow the outside, and then make a half rotation and follow.
So it goes on forever.
It's an eternal surface.
And which is very cool because it sort of represents sort of the eternal love thing and everything, and it's been used for that, and so it's been made into jewelry. And I don't know, I always thought that. See, I grew up with Mobius because I have an older brother who is a mathematician. And so I, of course, as a child, was plagued by having an older brother who was a mathematician. But the Mobius strip was always kind of fascinating. And, I used to make them when I was a kid. And if you split them down the middle and cut them in half, they do something very interesting. But anyway, so sometime we'll have to do a demonstration on Mobius strips. Probably not. But I'm talking too fast, I know. But anyway, so I got this really cool necklace and earrings that are little Mobius strips, and I thought that was very, very cool.
Okay.
So anyway,
I don't have anything with me that I got.
So that is that's sort of the Mobius story, and it's just very cool. So I just wanted to share that with you and my Tribble. So I always thought the Tribbles were just so cute, and so I have one now, and it makes a satisfying little purring sound and squeaky noise, and anyway, so I won't be quiet now. but hopefully we will get you more information on Kate's fundraiser in the future. And so, moving on.
If you want to.
I have not been drinking, I swear, except coffee. I drank too much coffee. You know.
Oh yeah, I see. It's caffeine.
It's
You're
caffeine.
wired.
I am a little wired. You know, I also got for Christmas one of my favorite things in the whole world: chocolate-covered coffee beans. And you know, if you're a coffee person, you know chocolate. If you don't have a cup of coffee, you can eat chocolate-covered coffee beans. They're wonderful, and they're just loaded with caffeine. So. Caffeine, you know, chocolate and coffee beans together. It's very cool. Anyway, so you know, all right. So maybe I'm a little wired.
It's okay.
But anyway, so there you go. And if we have time, we can talk about New Year's resolutions too. I don't have any real fancy ones.
I resolve not to make any new. No.
I know that's the obvious one is no more. I resolve not to make any more New Year's resolutions. Yeah. I don't.
And while we're
any.
at it, I hate.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, so you know, if any of you out there have any really interesting ones, feel free to call us and tell us. But you know, I have the usual ones. You know, the usual New Year's resolutions. But yeah, you know, they're silly anyway. But there's all sorts of interesting.
Find a practicing doctor who's also a National Guardsman and a volunteer fireman.
That could be cool, yeah. Yes, Tara is, of course, referring to the fact that I have a thing for guys in uniform.
And doctors.
Doctors, too, yeah. Doctors.
You could consider the lab coat a uniform.
Yeah, I like that. Doctors are nice. Well, you know, I have a soft spot for doctors and guys in uniform. I don't know what it is. It's not just me. I know that a lot of women just can't resist guys in uniform. Sort of. Guys in uniform, bad boys, doctors. I don't know. What can I say? And guys with dogs, too. You know, I have a soft spot for dogs.
So the canine unit drives you crazy.
Yeah, and other animals, too. You know, I have a soft spot for animals. But.
Like ducks. And camels.
Ducks and camels, yeah. So anyway, you tell us about the ducks and camels. I'll drink some coffee.
Well, I'd rather do the camel one because that's actually more meaningful. The duck one is I'll just cover briefly is a letter that was written into a newspaper by a 14-year-old girl. She's a homeschooled teenager, and not that it's anything against homeschool at all, but there's certainly I think something missing from her science education.
Right.
So she writes to the newspaper entitled. The article's entitled Ancient Behavior. And she writes, homosexuality, including same-sex marriage, is not an enlightened idea. The Romans practiced homosexuality. Surely after 2,000 years, our level of intelligence should have evolved somewhat so that we can truly pride ourselves on being cleverer than our forebears.
Cleverer.
Well, they also practiced heterosexuality, so I'm not sure why that wouldn't be off the table too. But she says, if homosexuality spreads, it can cause human evolution to come to a standstill. So again, you have the notion that it can spread.
Right.
It could threaten the human position on the evolutionary ladder. Presumably because if everybody was homosexual, nobody would be having kids.
Okay.
She goes on to say,
I'm sorry.
Ducks could take over the world.
Okay.
Ducks always nest in pairs, and if we allow same-sex marriage, then the ducks will have evolved further than we have.
Okay.
We will be in danger of all being equal, with ducks more equal than us. We should learn from history and not be stuck with copying ancient behavior. The government has no right to bring us back to the Stone Age. I don't want my children to have to compete with ducks. I want them to evolve further than I have. Any self-respecting human would aim for that too. None of this really bears any weight for me because I do not believe in evolution. However, the powers that be believe in evolution and have made many decisions based on it. They should be consistent. If you believe in evolution, you can't be in favor of homosexuality, or the ducks will get you in the end.
Okay. Yeah, you got to watch out for those ducks.
So that's the ducks. I know anyone that actually watches the show, we've been talking about the duck article for a while, and we always run out of time.
Yeah.
That's the reason I read it.
Okay,
so
ducks.
In light of the fact that we did get a last-minute save us from going over the cliff deal last night, even though we now have a couple of new cliffs at 30 days and 60 days and 90 days, we have the debt ceiling, which is going to have to be raised if we're going to pay for the programs that have been passed already, or magically come up with a whole lot of revenue really quickly. We have the sequester, the automatic spending, across-the-board spending cuts that, as of last night, was delayed for 60 days. And then we also have the government's currently working under a budget extension that has allowed them to continue operating for a certain number of months because we didn't pass a budget last year. And that will expire in 90 days, or a little under now. So the next 90 days, there's going to be a lot of tough decisions to make,
right.
A lot of haggling. So in light of all that comes the camel story. We read this once before, and this is really...
it's cute. It really is wonderful.
This is great for anyone who wants to know. This is well, it says it in the intro, but this is a Middle Eastern parable, basically. And it sort of hits the nail on the head. So the author says, with the subject of difficult negotiations, reminds me of one of my favorite stories from the Middle East. A man left to his 3 sons 17 camels. And maybe as a tie-in to your Mobius strip, some math.
Yes, yes.
3 sons, 17 camels. To the first son, he left half the camels. To the second son, he left 1/3 of the camels. And to the youngest son, he left 1/9 of the camels. Well, the 3 sons got into a negotiation. 17 doesn't divide by 2. It doesn't divide by 3. It doesn't divide by 9. Brotherly tempers started to get strained. Finally, in desperation, they went and they consulted a wise old woman. The wise old woman thought about their problem for a long time. And finally, she came back and said, well, I don't know if I can help you, but at least, if you want, you can have my 1 camel. So then they had 18 camels. The first son took his half of 18 is 9. The second son took his 1/3, 1/3 of 18 is 6. The youngest son took his 9th, 1/9 of 18 is 2. And they looked at it, having taken 9, 6, and 2. They took 17 out of the 18 camels. Having 1 camel left over, they gave it back to the wise old woman.
It's wonderful. Yes, it's a wonderful story.
Yes, it's one of those great little Middle Eastern parables.
Yeah.
Yes, you can't divide 17 in half.
Right.
But there's... Anyway.
Yes.
That should be self-explanatory. If it's not, then any talk of fiscal negotiations will be lost.
Anyway, yes. So cute, very cute story, and I like that. I like the camel story.
And we have a couple minutes before we probably want to run this. The B-roll. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that I saw in the news quickly. One was that Mexico has lifted the blood ban for the blood donation ban for gay and bisexual men.
They have? Wow.
Yes. Little notice procedure change that removes Mexico's ban on blood donations from gay and bisexual men went into effect on Christmas Day. The new health norm was first approved in August, published in the nation's regulatory diary in October, and went into effect December 25th, doing away with a 2-decade ban. Now, this is a ban that last year was re-upped here in the United States.
Yes.
It continues to be the case that if you fall into the category of MSM, which is men who have had sex with men, any time in your lifetime, you're banned from giving blood. That's all I'm going to say on that one. The other interesting one is that a marriage equality bill will be introduced into the Rhode Island legislature on Thursday, tomorrow, according to the Providence Journal. State Representative Arthur Handy, the bill sponsor, said he'll need Wednesday to recruit co-sponsors who will include openly gay House Speaker Gordon Fox. Rhode Island legislators have previously abandoned efforts to extend marriage rights to same-sex couples because of insufficient support. The state had had civil unions since 2011, and it recognizes out-of-state same-sex marriages, but it remains the only New England state without marriage equality. The 2012 election results increased the number of marriage equality supporters in the legislature, helping the bill's chance of passage. Also, Governor Lincoln Chafee is a supporter. So,
very cool.
That's good news, too.
Yeah. Good.
So those are the two little things to throw out there. Did you have anything more? Do you want to go to the B-roll?
We should probably, I think we should probably go to the B-roll because we're going to run out of time.
It's only 18 minutes. We'll come back and still have some time.
Okay.
So the B-roll tonight is another TED Talk. I don't have my paperwork with me about the speaker, so I'm a little lapse on knowing. But he is a former Assistant Secretary of Defense and a professor of government. I don't remember which school. And the talk is, well, he'll explain it in just a moment, but the talk is about going into a new fiscal year, going into a new Congress, a new year of legislation, the shifting power structure in the world, and how we interact with it.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll roll the B-roll, and we'll see you in 18 minutes.
Okay.
I'm going to talk to you about power in this 21st century. And basically, what I'd like to tell you is that power is changing. And there are two types of changes I want to discuss. One is power transition, which is change of power among states. And there, the simple version of the message is it's moving from west to east. The other is power diffusion, the way power is moving from all states, west or east, to non-state actors. Those two things are the huge shifts of power in our century, and I want to tell you about them each separately, and then how they interact, and why, in the end, there may be some good news. When we talk about power transition, we often talk about the rise of Asia. It really should be called the recovery or return of Asia. If we looked at the world in 1800, you'd find that more than half of the world's people lived in Asia, and they made more than half of the world's product. Now, fast forward to 1900, half the world's people, more than half, still live in Asia, but they're now making only a fifth of the world's product. What happened? The Industrial Revolution, which meant that all of a sudden Europe and America became the dominant center of the world. What we're going to see in the 21st century is Asia gradually returning to being more than half of the world's population and more than half of the world's product. That's important, and it's an important shift. But let me tell you a little bit about the other shift that I'm talking about, which is power diffusion. To understand power diffusion, put this in your mind. Computing and communications costs have fallen 1,000-fold between 1970 and the beginning of this century. Now, that's a big abstract number, but to make it more real, if the price of an automobile had fallen as rapidly as the price of computing power, you could buy a car today for $5. Now, when the price of any technology declines that dramatically, the barriers to entry go down. Anybody can play in the game. So in 1970, if you wanted to communicate from Oxford to Johannesburg to New Delhi to Brasilia and anywhere simultaneously, you could do it. The technology was there. But to be able to do it, you had to be very rich. A government, a multinational corporation, maybe the Catholic Church, but you had to be pretty wealthy. Now, anybody has that capacity, which previously was restricted by price just to a few actors, if they have the price of entry into an internet cafe. And the last time I looked, it was something like £1 an hour. And if you have Skype, it's free. So capabilities that were once restricted are now available to everyone. And what that means is not that the age of the state is over. The state still matters, but the stage is crowded. The state's not alone. There are many, many actors. Some of that's good. Oxfam, a great non-governmental actor. Some of it's bad. Al-Qaeda, another non-governmental actor. But think of what it does to how we think in traditional terms and concepts. We think in terms of war and interstate war. And you can think back to 1941 when the government of Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor. It's worth noticing that a non-state actor attacking the United States in 2001 killed more Americans than the government of Japan did in 1941. You might think of that as the privatization of war. So we're seeing a great change in terms of diffusion of power. Now, the problem is that we're not thinking about it in very innovative ways. So let me step back and ask, what's power? Power is simply the ability to affect others to get the outcomes you want. And you can do it in three ways. You can do it with threats of coercion, sticks. You can do it with payments, carrots. Or you can do it by getting others to want what you want. And that ability to get others to want what you want, to get the outcomes you want without coercion or payment, is what I call soft power. And that soft power has been much neglected and much misunderstood. And yet it's tremendously important. Indeed, if you can learn to use more soft power, you can save a lot on carrots and sticks. Traditionally, the way people thought about power was primarily in terms of military power. For example, the great Oxford historian who taught here at this university, T.a.L.L, defined a great power as a country able to prevail in war. But we need a new narrative if we're to understand power in the 21st century. It's not just prevailing in war, though war still persists. It's not whose army wins. It's also whose story wins. And we have to think much more in terms of narratives and whose narrative is going to be effective. Now, let me go back to the question of power transition between states and what's happening there. The narratives that we use now tend to be the rise and fall of the great powers. And the current narrative is all about the rise of China and the decline of the United States. Indeed, with the 2008 financial crisis, many people said this was the beginning of the end of American power. The tectonic plates of world politics were shifting. And President Medvedev of Russia, for example, pronounced in 2008 this was the beginning of the end of the United States power. But in fact, this metaphor of decline is often very misleading. If you look at history, in recent history, you'll see that cycles of belief in American decline come and go every 10 or 15 years or so. In 1958, after the Soviets put up Sputnik, that's the end of America. In 1973, with the oil embargo and the closing of the gold window, that was the end of America. In the 1980s, as America went through a transition in the Reagan period between the Rust Belt economy of the Midwest to the Silicon Valley economy of California, that was the end of America. But in fact, what we've seen is none of those were true. Indeed, people were over-enthusiastic in the early 2000s, thinking America could do anything, which led us into some disastrous foreign policy adventures, and now we're back to decline again. The moral of his story is all these narratives about rise and fall and decline tell us a lot more about psychology than they do about reality. If we try to focus on the reality, then what we need to focus on is what's really happening in terms of China and the United States. Goldman Sachs has projected that China, the Chinese economy, will surpass that of the US by 2027. So we've got, 17 more years to go or so before China's bigger. Now, someday, with 1.3 billion people getting richer, they are going to be bigger than the United States. But be very careful about these projections, such as the Goldman Sachs projection, as though that gives you an accurate picture of power transition in this century. Let me mention 3 reasons why it's too simple. First of all, it's a linear projection. You know, everything says, here's the growth rate of China, here's the growth rate of the US, here it goes, straight line. History's not linear. There are often bumps in the road, accidents along the way. The second thing is that the Chinese economy passes the US economy in, let's say, 2030, which it may. That will be a measure of total economic size, but not of per capita income. Won't tell you about the composition of the economy. China still has large areas of underdevelopment. And per capita income is a better measure of the sophistication of the economy, and that the Chinese won't catch up or pass the Americans until somewhere in the latter part, after 2050 of this century. The other point that's worth noticing is how one-dimensional this projection is. You know, it looks at economic power measured by GDP. Doesn't tell you much about military power, doesn't tell you much about soft power. It's all one-dimensional. And also, when we think about the rise of Asia, or return of Asia, as I called it a little bit earlier, it's worth remembering Asia is not one thing. If you're sitting in Japan, or in New Delhi, or in Hanoi, your view of the rise of China is a little different than if you're sitting in Beijing. Indeed, one of the advantages that the Americans will have in terms of power in Asia is all those countries want an American insurance policy against the rise of China. It's as though Mexico and Canada were hostile neighbors to the United States, which they're not. So these simple projections of the Goldman Sachs type are not telling us what we need to know about power transition. But you might ask, well, so what in any case? Why does it matter? Who cares? Is this just a game that diplomats and academics play? The answer is it matters quite a lot, because if you believe in decline and you get the answers wrong on this, the facts, not the myths, you may have policies which are very dangerous. Let me give you an example from history. The Peloponnesian War was the great conflict in which the Greek city-state system tore itself apart 2.5 millennia ago. What caused it? Thucydides, the great historian of the Peloponnesian War, said it was the rise in the power of Athens and the fear it created in Sparta. Notice both halves of that explanation. Many people argue that the 21st century is going to repeat the 20th century, in which World War I, the great conflagration in which the European state system tore itself apart and destroyed its centrality in the world, that was caused by the rise in the power of Germany and the fear it created in Britain. So there are people who are telling us this is going to be reproduced today, that what we're going to see is the same thing now in this century. No, I think that's wrong. It's bad history. For one thing, Germany had surpassed Britain in industrial strength by 1900. And as I said earlier, China has not passed the United States. But also, if you have this belief and it creates a sense of fear, it leads to overreaction. And the greatest danger we have of managing this power transition, of the shift toward the East, is fear. To paraphrase Franklin Roosevelt from a different context, the greatest thing we have to fear is fear itself. We don't have to fear the rise of China or the return of Asia. And if we have policies in which we take it with that larger historical perspective, we're going to be able to manage this process. Let me say a word now about the distribution of power and how it relates to power diffusion, and then pull these two types together. If you ask how is power distributed in the world today, it's distributed much like a three-dimensional chess game. Top board, military power among states. The United States is the only superpower, and it's likely to remain that way for 2 or 3 decades. China's not going to replace the U.S. on this military board. Middle board of this three-dimensional chess game, economic power among states. Power is multipolar. There are balancers. The U.S., Europe, China, Japan can balance each other. The bottom board of this three-dimensional chess game, the board of transnational relations, things that cross borders outside the control of governments, things like climate change, drug trade, financial flows, pandemics, all these things that cross borders outside the control of governments. There, nobody's in charge. It makes no sense to call this unipolar or multipolar. Power is chaotically distributed. And the only way you can solve these problems, and this is where many of our greatest challenges are coming in this century, is through cooperation, through working together, which means that soft power becomes more important, that ability to organize networks to deal with these kinds of problems and to be able to get cooperation. Another way of putting it is that as we think of power in the 21st century, we want to get away from the idea that power is always zero-sum. My gain is your loss and vice versa. Power can also be positive-sum, where your gain can be my gain. If China develops greater energy security and greater capacity to deal with its problems of carbon emissions, that's good for us, as well as good for China, as well as good for everybody else. So empowering China to deal with its own problems of carbon is good for everybody. And it's not a zero-sum, I win, you lose. It's one in which we can all gain. So as we think about power in this century, we want to get away from this view that it's all I win, you lose. Now, I don't mean to be Pollyannish about this. Wars persist, power persists, military power is important, keeping balances is important. All this still persists. Hard power is there, and it will remain. But unless you learn how to mix hard power with soft power into strategies that I call smart power, you're not going to deal with the new kinds of problems that we're facing. So the key question that we need to think about as we look at this is how do we work together to produce global public goods, things from which all of us can benefit? How do we define our national interests so that it's not just zero-sum, but positive-sum? In that sense, if we define our interests, for example, for the United States, the way Britain defined its interests in the 19th century, keeping an open trading system, keeping monetary stability, keeping freedom of the seas, those were good for Britain. They were good for others as well. And in the 21st century, we have to do an analog to that. How do we produce global public goods which are good for us, but good for everyone at the same time? And that's going to be the good news dimension of what we need to think about as we think of power in the 21st century. There are ways to define our interests in which, while protecting ourselves with hard power, we can organize with others in networks to produce not only public goods, but ways that will enhance our soft power. So if one looks at the statements that have been made about this, I am impressed that when Hillary Clinton described the foreign policy of the Obama administration, she said that the foreign policy of the Obama administration was going to be smart power, as she put it, using all the tools in our foreign policy toolbox. And if we're going to deal with these two great power shifts that I described, the power shift represented by transition among states, the power shift represented by diffusion of power away from all states, we're going to have to develop a new narrative of power in which we combine hard and soft power into strategies of smart power. And that's the good news I have. We can do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey. Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. I think we still have, yeah. Okay. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. That was very interesting. And thank you, Tara, for finding that for us.
Maybe that wasn't the full 18 minutes.
No.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
Okay. There was something at the end of that.
Probably a commercial or something.
Yeah. Yeah. They tend to run commercial.
It tends to move on.
They do the commercial. Anyway, so anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and we'll certainly bring you more TED Talks in the future. The TED Talks are very cool. You get some very interesting people and very interesting points of view.
And we'll get back to more and more science stuff. It's just when the politics that have been in the news in the last weeks, and the politics that will be in the news in the upcoming weeks, I think it's important sometimes to make sure that when you're listening to our politicians, when you see what they're talking about, that it not be framed strictly in the context of what the news media is necessarily providing. That, the notion of okay, well, should we declare China a currency manipulator, or this and that and the other thing? There is a power shift going on, and there are things that have to be looked at, as he said, on multiple different levels. And certainly we've seen, we see it every day, and we've seen other TED Talks on multinational corporations and how they're acting in a non-governmental way across borders and have a dramatically different effect on things. We talk to people now about when for instance, when you say, buy an American car.
How do you do that?
Does that mean buy from Ford because they're an American company, even if the car is made in Mexico? Or does that mean buy from Toyota, which is a Japanese company, but the car is made in Ohio? Which one of those is the American car?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell now.
So and that's the kind of thing that you'll start to see we've already started to see when they talk about these multinational non-government actors are going to play a much bigger role.
Yeah.
The news that made such a ruckus in the election that Jeep is going to be building cars in China. Right? It was the Obama administration sold the company to some Germans who are going to start building Jeeps in China. Well, yes, but not for the American market, for the same reason that Honda and Toyota and Nissan, Volkswagen build here. Because it's a whole lot cheaper to build it here for the market here than it is to pay the shipping costs with fuel at the rates that they're going at to ship it overseas. That's the same thing for American-based companies. If you're going to be selling in the European or Asian markets, it's a whole lot better to build the cars there. It's better PR, too, because you're employing the locals.
Yeah.
It's just, you look at Honda and Toyota, and they figured that out 12 years ago, 15 years ago.
Sure.
And now the American car companies are figuring that out, because they're breaking into the Asian markets that we're going to have to do that. And the models might not even be the same, but the Wrangler will.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, you run into those kinds of things where the manipulation or the misinterpretation of facts can really distort what you hear. And sometimes the distortion is intended intentionally. Well, it's intended.
Right, yes. Exactly.
Intentionally. But quite often, sort of if there's a New Year's resolution to be made to bring it around, that I think everybody should consider making, it's to take a more active role in our community, and to take a more active role in our country as a result. You don't have to be able to affect the national elections, but what you do have to be able to do is, at least as an active citizen of the country, is to take the time to understand what you're hearing, whether it comes from politicians or the news media or us.
Yeah. Yeah. You can trust us, I swear.
Well, you know what, and trust gets earned, and you know, all that stuff. But certainly, the resolution to become more active in your community, more active at the local or state level, whatever you can do.
Yeah.
For community programs, for volunteering at whether it's Restore, or whether it's a homeless shelter or an equine rescue, or even if it's just to assistant coach a kid's softball team. There's giving back to the community. There's being an active participant, an active citizen. That means paying attention to what your politicians are saying and doing, so you can react to it in a reasonable way, and understanding the context in which we live. So I guess maybe that's two, but
Well, no, that's very.
it's all sort of active citizenship.
Yeah. Wonderful ideas. Not obviously not new ideas, but yes, very very wonderful for resolutions. Absolutely, I like it. So I'll add those to mine. but
Be an active citizen.
I mean, and we try. We do try. And honestly, we are probably more active than some, not as active as others.
And time is precious, and there are lots of other things out there, but at the very least, you can't help the information that gets thrown at you, whether it's a tweet or a comment on your Facebook page, or something on the nightly news, or whatever it may be. And it's sort of like, at the end of the day, it is our responsibility as the citizens for which the government is representing us, for whom the government is representing, that we put those things into context, that we understand the information that's being given to us in its entirety, and not just in its presented face.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's one element of being an active citizen in the country and in the community.
Yeah. Very nice. So, anyway, we
we only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to stop.
we are actually about to run out of time. So obviously we can't go too much farther than that. But that's wonderful ideas. Yes. And by all means, yes, I agree. So we are going to have to leave you, but before we go, I just want to remind everybody that yes, as of next week, we are moving to 7 o'clock. So if you want to keep watching us, you're going to have to go back an hour. But yes, 7 o'clock next week we will be on, and we will keep you posted as far as how that will change in the future, because it frequently does. And but for the next 13 weeks.
January, February, March.
Yeah, we will be on at 7 o'clock. So on that note, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and thank you all for joining us tonight, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.